Hello, I would like to do a video commenting on Hans Hermann Hoppe lecture in the annual Libertarian Freedom Society meeting in 2023. It's the latest. And I think he said some very interesting things with all of which I don't agree. We will see, because I am a great critic of Rothbardian paleo-libertarianism and its foreign policy ideas. So this may work out to be a nice video, a nice comment from my side. Let's go.
And now I start with a serious subject. Actually, even from a libertarian point of view, my teacher and mentor Murray Rothbard always said, yes, we have thousands of issues, but the most important issue is peace and war. That overrides everything else.
Well, we shall see that the interpretation of peace and war in Rothbardian libertarianism is quite different than that among rational and reasonable people.
That is life and death. All the other ones you can somehow deal with. And I will, because of that, start talking about the war in the Ukraine in libertarian perspective. There are obviously other perspectives, but I think these other perspectives are wrong perspectives. Again, that is all satire, of course.
Hoppe says that all that he says is a satire because of hate speech laws, which may apply to his lecture.
My speech here last year in Bodrum was on Germany and also touched on Germany's role in the ongoing war between Russia and the Ukraine.
The ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine is in fact a war of aggression, of Russia aggressing against Ukraine. It is quite characteristic of libertarians to spin this theme in a way that would equivocate Ukraine with Russia, as two sides are equally guilty of this war. No, only Russia is guilty of attacking Ukraine.
Actually, we have to say the war between Russia on the one hand and the United States as the boss of NATO.
Again, Hoppe already plunges deep into the equivocation that the United States is somehow equally responsible for this war. Indeed, it is a war between Russia and the whole Western world, but the Russia is the attacker here.
And its various European vassal states.
Oh yeah, United States and its vassal states. Here Hoppe completely loses it. I have to say from the get-go, he loses it completely, because he uses the term vassal state in reference to European NATO members, vassals to United States. But tell me, how does vassal-lord relationship really work? Definitely not as it works within the context of NATO and the United States relations to Europe. Vassals usually contribute money or other resources to their lords in exchange for protection. But United States actually pays significantly more into the NATO in order to protect Europe. So it is actually United States which is the vassal of Europe. United States has been protecting Europe since 1945, has been paying much more than other European countries into NATO, using, of course, American taxpayers' money to subsidize European defense. But for Hoppe, European nations are the vassals of the United States. It is a complete reversal of the facts on the ground. It is manipulation on the side of libertarians. It started with Rothbard and continues with Hoppe.
And in particular, of course, Germany and the Ukraine and the Ukrainians on the other hand, the Ukraine being, so to speak, the proxy of the United States.
This is again another talking point of leftists like Chomsky and libertarians like Hoppe, that Ukraine is a proxy of the United States in the war against Russia. But in fact, Ukraine, perhaps we can call it a proxy. It is a proxy in a war of Russia against the West. This is the only war which is going on, the war of Russia against the West, not the other way around. Russia is the aggressor. It started aggressing against Western nations by, for example, murdering Russian dissidents on the soil of Great Britain, doing many psyops and cyber attacks all around Europe, engaging in American political process during the presidential elections of 2016, and waging an information war upon the West since the days of the Soviet Union, as we all know, after Yuri Bezmenov famous lectures in the 1980s. So Hoppe doesn't acknowledge it.
Using the Ukraine as a dispensable tool, as the useful idiots, and
Ukrainians defending themselves against the aggression by the Russian imperial machine are somehow useful idiots for the West, for the America. Here is the problem with Rothbardian libertarianism, which Hoppe is a part of. They hate America more than they can see evil in other regimes. They consider America the worst regime, while authoritarian dictatorship of Russia or of communist China is completely doesn't bother them. So Ukrainians who were invaded in 2014 and tried to regain their lost provinces, which are now under occupation, completely annexed by Russia, and then invaded again in February 2022 by Putinist Russia in order for the whole Ukraine to be subjugated by Russia, somehow they are the useful idiots, because according to Hoppe, the solution for weaker nations bullied by evil regimes like Russia is to lie down, surrender, and get your ass rammed.
And this war or this speech has not gone over too well with supposedly libertarian folks from formerly East Bloc countries.
Indeed, because we in Eastern Europe, we know Russia intimately. We not only know Russia in its Soviet Union form, we also know Russia from before the Soviet Union. We know Russia from the 18th and 19th century, when it was an empire, land-grabbing empire. An empire which Russified the conquered nations, tried to completely culturally appropriate, for instance, Poland and other provinces. So we know Russia, we know what Russian culture, Russian political culture is. It is an empire, it is a nation, a society, which thinks of itself as an empire with claims to other lands, other people's lands, which includes Ukraine, which includes Belarus, which is already under Russia's boot, which includes Baltic republics. Yes, Soviet Union invaded Baltic republics in 1940, and Putin many times passed the idea that Russia still claims Baltic republics to be her territory. And what next? Poland, Slovakia, Moldova, all of these territories used to be part of the Russian Empire in the 19th century, so Putinist Russia may still want to somehow control them in order to recreate the great Russian Empire.
We had always plenty of people from Poland and the Baltic countries.
Yes, because we are threatened by Russia, threatened every day.
At this conference, and it is disappointing that they decided not to come back, maybe.
It is not disappointing. It is actually very wise of them that we no longer condone your pro-Russian propaganda outlets like Property and Freedom Society. We do not condone your twisting of libertarianism, or maybe we do not condone your complete lunacy in this regard.
If they come back next time again, I do not know. We have very few now, actually only 2 people who come from the former Eastern Soviet-dominated countries.
But maybe perhaps Ukrainians didn't come because they fight in a war of defense against the aggressive Russian regime.
I do not regret at all what I said last year on the subject, or find any serious fault with my analysis that I presented there.
Of course, you don't find a serious fault within your analysis because you are completely you've completely lost it.
To the contrary, if anything, later events, in particular the destruction of Nord Stream, the Nord Stream pipeline, by the United States or anybody in close cooperation with the United States, has, of course, strengthened my conviction that what I said last time was by and large correct.
No, the destruction of Nord Stream, perpetrated probably by Ukrainian intelligence with help of maybe Mossad, maybe American special forces, doesn't in any way make your analysis correct. It simply shows that in a war with Russia against the West needs to stop relying on Russian natural resources like gas and oil. Otherwise, Russia will use this dependence to blackmail us, blackmail Europe, to bend to its will.
You remember that nobody seems to be investigating this Nord Stream pipeline in great detail. They even try to blame the Russians, even though every normal amateur detective would say, who has a motive to do this sort of thing? What motive could the Russians possibly have to blow up the pipe, this pipe that they also could have turned off at any time in order to have more negotiable.
And Russia threatened to completely starve Europe, to freeze Europe to death. So now they don't have this ability, precisely because Nord Stream was disconnected.
Negotiating room instead of blowing it up. So in my view, that seems to be perfectly clear. Either the United States or somebody in close cooperation with the United States did this sort of thing. But nobody in Western Europe seems to seriously pursue an investigation into this matter, which was a matter of the biggest industrial terrorism that has ever occurred in the past.
Calling disconnection from Russia industrial terrorism when we already, in Europe, we already had the supply of natural gas from United States secured, is really, is typical libertarian twisting of facts.
World War II era in the European scenery. And the other thing that came out in the meantime were speeches by Merkel and by Hollande, by Macron and Zelensky, that the Minsk agreement that had been negotiated between Russia, Ukraine, Germany and France, some other countries, that provided some sort of solution to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine by granting autonomy to some of the eastern provinces in the Ukraine, that the Minsk agreement had not been meant seriously by Merkel and all of her followers. but was only planned in order to give the Ukraine more time in order to be weaponized, armed to the hilt, and prepare for a war against Russia.
Russia attacked Ukraine in February 2022. It did it not because they were provoked by Western nations, but because Putin wants to control Ukraine. Plain and simple. You know better what Putin wants? He said it. He said it.
Admitted this sort of thing. The somewhat indignant reaction by the typical Eastern European, but also by many Western European libertarians, of my speech on the topic presented here in last year, it has, in my view, little, if anything, to do with erroneous explanations or faulty analysis of the horrifying events still going on before our very eyes in the Ukraine then, but it is owed instead to their very own superficial or fake understanding of libertarianism.
Yes, we are wrong because we do not understand libertarianism. Indeed. Hoppe later says that, libertarianism explains that any state is an evil regime preying on its population, and the existence of wars is predicated upon the existence of states, that the wars must happen because states exist. But Rothbardian libertarians cannot, or simply do not want to, acknowledge that states differ from each other, and there are democratic states which are liberal and do not go to war with each other and usually do not aggress against their neighbors, and there are authoritarian dictatorships like Russia who are much more oppressive towards its own population and who also are aggressive outwards. Hoppe several decades ago developed a theory of imperialism which was completely twisted. He claimed that it is the liberal, internally liberal countries, democratic countries like America, which are aggressive outwards towards other countries, which is a complete twisting of what happened, for example, in 2003 in Iraq. According to Hoppe, America is an aggressive nation precisely because it is democratic, and it invaded Iraq in order to spread democracy, which is only half true. Iraq was an evil dictatorship, and America during that period of time was under control of Republican administration, which had this idea of neoconservatism, that the Western world can somehow eliminate evil in the world by supplanting authoritarian dictatorships with democracies. But of course it failed in Iraq, although the Iraq case is not as bad regarding the possibility of democracy in Middle East as usually is painted, because currently Iraq is a democratic government, believe it or not. But anyway, this one example of American adventurism in Iraq is somehow the evidence that Hoppe's theory of imperialism is right, that democratic countries go to war with the whole world in order to spread democracy. But this is not true. Can you point one European democratic country which went to war in the last 50 years? Of course, it didn't happen. Only authoritarian dictatorships attack their neighbors or engage in activity which can be considered, for instance, information war, cyber war, terrorism. For instance, Soviet Union engaged for decades in financing and supporting terrorist groups all over Western world in order to destabilize the West, and it is widely documented. KGB was involved with a wide network of spies and agents in financing, training, and instigating leftist communist rebellions all over the Western world, taking over countries like Cuba or Chile. So definitely America is not as bad an example of an imperial power which seeks to control the world as, for instance, Russia or Communist China. Communist China already is waging a sort of a neo-colonial economic war against the West by taking over third world countries with Chinese investments, loans, which these countries cannot pay back, and basically taking over their infrastructure. Somehow Hoppe never mentions it, because why would he? He hates America and he considers America to be the greatest evil.
And the requirement of libertarian or generally revisionist historical research, judgment, evaluation. In fact, it is a result of nationalist, collectivist, and statist sentiments overtaking and trumping all calm and sober libertarian thought and analysis in the face of war.
The sober libertarian analysis of the war is for Ukraine to surrender, to not fight back against Russia, just let Russia's troops march into Kiev and supplant democratically elected government of Zelensky with a Russian puppet. Let Russian tanks arrive at the Ukrainian-Polish border and basically threaten NATO with provocations. Just never fight back, never fight for your own independence and sovereignty. This is the libertarian way. Why? Because states are bad. So when states wage a defensive war against an aggressor, bad, states bad. This is the libertarian analysis of the war. And somehow I don't have much more stomach for listening to Hoppe anymore. You can watch this video until the end, but you will learn nothing more. All the points of Hoppe I've already presented. That is libertarian international policy theory is like this. All states are equally bad, regardless whether they are liberal democracies or authoritarian dictatorships, and thus, as a libertarian, you should not support wars of defense against aggressors because states bad. This is the genius of libertarian analysis in the person of Hoppe. So that's so idiotic, completely contrary to any reasonable classical liberal ideas, that I consider libertarianism or Rothbardian libertarianism, paleo-libertarianism to be an intellectual crime to even ponder these ideas.